Jonathan Hayes was a man used to getting everything he wanted. At 35, he had already become one of the wealthiest individuals in the country. His name whispered in boardrooms and echoed in the news like a symbol of ambition, success, and relentless drive. He had built an empire from scratch. Software companies, real estate ventures, and high-profile investments had all contributed to the empire he now commanded with an iron fist. Money, power, and influence came naturally to him. Yet despite his towering success, he found little joy in the mundane world. Ordinary things bored him. The casual greetings of people on the street, the small pleasures of a family dinner, or the humdrum of a routine day. Everything in his life had a price tag, and Jonathan believed that the world ran on transactions. That was until a single event at a tiny, unassuming cafe threatened to remind him otherwise. It was a rainy Thursday morning when Jonathan decided to step out of his glass skyscraper office to have a breakfast meeting with an investor. The city streets were slick, the sound of raindrops pounding against umbrellas and puddles creating a rhythmic chaos. He was dressed in a tailored gray suit, polished black shoes, and a tie that matched the color of his eyes, a sharp, calculating blue. His leather wallet contained everything he could possibly need: credit cards, IDs, and emergency cash, yet none of it seemed capable of preparing him for what was about to happen. Jonathan walked into Sweet Moments Cafe, a quaint, little-known establishment tucked between two high-rise buildings. The smell of freshly baked bread and warm coffee immediately enveloped him. Despite his wealth, Jonathan often preferred places that were modest and uncomplicated. They reminded him, in some strange way, of the life he had left behind when ambition had consumed him. He approached the counter, ordered a croissant, a cappuccino, and a freshly squeezed orange juice, and presented his platinum credit card to the cashier, a young man barely out of college, with a nervous smile and ink-stained fingers. Seconds passed. Then the cashier's smile faltered. "Sir, I'm sorry, but your card has been declined." Jonathan's brows furrowed. Declined. It had never happened before. He swiped the card again and again. Each time the machine beeped with the same cold, humiliating rejection. A few customers glanced up, sensing the tension in the air. Jonathan's fingers clenched around the edge of the counter, his usual composure starting to crack. "This must be a mistake," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Please try it again." The young cashier shook his head apologetically. "I'm afraid it's not working, sir." Jonathan felt an unusual heat rise in his chest. Not anger, not embarrassment, but something he couldn't quite name. He reached for his phone to call his bank, but in the moment he noticed a small figure watching him from the corner of the cafe. She was a little girl, no older than 8, with big, curious eyes and a tattered pink dress that had clearly seen better days. Her hair was tied into 2 messy pigtails, and she clutched a small worn-out stuffed rabbit in her arms. She smiled timidly at him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, the harsh sting of embarrassment he felt at the declined card softened slightly. The girl approached the counter, her small steps barely making a sound on the wooden floor. Jonathan watched her, bewildered. As she reached into her small pocket and pulled out a crumpled paper, she handed it to the cashier. The note read, "I want to pay for the man's breakfast." He looked sad. "Please let me." Jonathan blinked, unsure whether to laugh or scold. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice almost trembling between confusion and disbelief. The little girl's eyes sparkled with determination, and she repeated, "I want to help him, please." The cashier looked at Jonathan, then at the girl. There was something about her sincerity, the pure, uncalculated generosity in her small gesture, that made the atmosphere in the cafe shift. Jonathan, accustomed to transactions of thousands, even millions, realized he was witnessing something far beyond money, humility, kindness, something no credit card could ever buy. "Are you sure?" Jonathan asked, his voice softer now. He felt a strange lump forming in his throat. The little girl nodded eagerly, her tiny hands clutching the note like a sacred artifact. With a shaking hand, she reached into a tiny coin purse and pulled out a few coins and crumpled bills. They were barely enough to cover his simple breakfast. Yet it was more than just money. It was the gesture of giving, selfless and untainted. Jonathan knelt slightly to meet her gaze, his normally icy demeanor melting under the warmth radiating from her smile. "You're paying for me?" he asked, unable to hide the awe in his voice. The girl nodded solemnly. Yes, she said simply. Everyone deserves a little help sometimes. The cafe seemed to hold its breath as Jonathan accepted her coins. He felt a wave of gratitude, something he hadn't experienced in years washing over him. It was strange and beautiful, an emotion, more valuable than the wealth that had defined his life. Thank you, he whispered, his voice almost breaking. This it means more than you'll ever know. The little girl's mother, who had been quietly observing from a corner table, smiled softly. She nodded to Jonathan. She has a kind heart, she said. And sometimes a kind heart is worth more than a fortune. Jonathan watched as the girl returned to her seat, her small act of generosity leaving a lingering warmth in the room. He realized in that moment that wealth without empathy, without humanity, was meaningless. The incident was small in the grand scheme of the world, but it had shaken him to his core. A poor little girl had reminded a billionaire that kindness was priceless, and Jonathan vowed silently that he would never forget the lesson she had given him on that rainy Thursday morning. Over the next few days, Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about the little girl. Her simple act had disrupted the monotony of his life and forced him to confront a truth he had long ignored. Money could not fix everything. There were things far more important: human connection, compassion, empathy that no amount of wealth could ever purchase. He found himself walking past the same cafe more than once, hoping to see her again. On the third day, he did. She was sitting at the same table, scribbling in a notebook with her stuffed rabbit by her side. Jonathan approached cautiously, unsure how to start a conversation with a child who had unknowingly changed his life. "Hello," he said gently. The girl looked up, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized him. "Hi," she said shyly. Jonathan smiled, kneeling to meet her gaze again. "I've been thinking about you," he said. "Your gesture, it made me realize something important. Can I talk to you?" The girl nodded, and Jonathan pulled out a chair, sitting down across from her. He felt awkward at first, trying to find the words to express the gratitude and humility he felt. "You see," he began, "I have a lot of money. Too much, maybe. But your kindness, it taught me something I hadn't learned from all my success." The girl tilted her head, curious. "What's that?" she asked softly. "That the richest people in the world," Jonathan said slowly, "aren't always the happiest. And sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can mean more than everything money can buy." The girl smiled, and Jonathan felt a tear prick the corner of his eye. "Then I'm glad I could help," she said. "Even a little can be a lot." Jonathan looked around the cafe, taking in the warm, inviting atmosphere that had always seemed so ordinary to him but now felt extraordinary. He realized that he had been living in a bubble, insulated by wealth and privilege, blind to the struggles and beauty of the world around him. He made a decision, one that would change the course of his life. He offered to help the girl and her family in ways that truly mattered, not just money, but opportunities. Education, healthcare, and a secure home were gifts he could give that would endure far longer than a fleeting transaction. The girl's mother, initially hesitant, soon realized that Jonathan's intentions were sincere. Months passed, and Jonathan became a regular at the cafe, not because he needed to flaunt his wealth, but because he had found something far more valuable: purpose. He watched the little girl grow, her curiosity, intelligence, and kindness flourishing with the support he provided. Jonathan's empire continued to thrive, but now it was guided by compassion. Business deals became opportunities to create positive change, and he used his influence to uplift those who had been overlooked by society. One afternoon, as Jonathan sat with the girl, now a little older and more confident, he reflected on the incident that had started it all. The memory of his card being declined, and the girl stepping forward to help him was still vivid, a reminder that life's most profound lessons often come from the most unexpected sources. He realized that he had not only given her a better future, but had also received a priceless gift in return: the ability to see the world with open eyes and an open heart. In the end, Jonathan Hayes learned that true wealth was not measured in dollars or possessions, but in the depth of human connection and the courage to act selflessly. A poor little girl with nothing but a brave heart and a desire to help had done the unthinkable. She had reminded a billionaire that kindness is the most valuable currency of all. And as he walked through the streets of the city, no longer blind to its struggles and wonders, Jonathan knew that his life had been forever changed, not by money or power, but by the unassuming power of compassion. And so in the hum of the bustling city, amidst the rush of commerce and ambition, a small, seemingly insignificant act became a ripple that touched lives in ways no one could have predicted. The billionaire's card may have been declined, but what it revealed was far more important. The heart has a currency all its own, and it can change the world one small act at a time.